The UES Adamantine was not a beautiful ship. She was ugly in the way that working things are ugly. Her hull was covered in repair patches from a dozen different shipyards. Her paint was faded from years of radiation exposure. Her engines made a sound that the chief engineer called character and everyone else called concerning, but she was reliable. She had carried cargo and crew through 17 star systems without losing a single soul. Captain Elena Vasquez loved that ship the way a farmer loves an old tractor. It was not pretty, but it worked. On the day everything changed, the Adamantine was 3 days out from Colony 7, escorting a convoy of supply ships through the reaches. The reaches were technically neutral space, but everyone knew the Breath Dominion considered it their territory, and the Breath considered most of the galaxy their territory. They were an old species, older than humanity by thousands of years. They had been building empires when humans were still figuring out fire, and they never let anyone forget it. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge watching the stars through the main viewport. She was a tall woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much. She had been in the fleet for 30 years. She had survived 3 wars and 2 court martials. The court martials were not her fault. The wars mostly were not either. Captain, said Lieutenant Park from the sensor station. His voice was calm, but Vasquez had served with him long enough to hear the worry underneath. I am picking up something strange. Multiple contacts bearing 47. How many? Vasquez asked. Park was quiet for a moment. His fingers moved across the console. 12. No, 15. They are coming out of the asteroid field. Vasquez felt her stomach tighten. 15. Ships hiding in an asteroid field meant one thing: ambush, identification. Working on it. Park's face went pale. Vreth, they are Verith warships. 1 battle cruiser, 6 destroyers, 8 support vessels. The bridge went silent. Everyone knew what this meant. A single Breath destroyer could match 3 human cruisers. A battle cruiser was worse. Much worse. Communications, Vasquez said, keeping her voice steady. Signal the convoy. Tell them to scatter and run maximum speed. Do not wait for us. Captain, the communications officer, a young woman named Tors, looked at her with wide eyes. We cannot fight them alone. We are not going to fight them, Vasquez said. We are going to slow them down now. Send that message. Tors nodded and turned to her console. Her hands were shaking. Vasquez opened the shipwide channel. All hands, this is the Captain. Battle stations, this is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. The Adamantine came alive. Crew members ran to their posts. Weapon systems powered up. The old ship shook as her engines pushed harder. Vasquez knew it would not be enough. The Breath ships were faster. They were stronger. They were better in every way that mattered. But she was not going to let her convoy die without a fight. They are hailing us, Tora said. Put it through. The main screen flickered, and then a face appeared. It was a Breath commander, his gray skin marked with the ritual scars of high rank. His eyes were black and empty like holes in space. When he spoke, his voice was like stones grinding together. Human vessel, you have entered Dominion space. Your presence here is an insult. Your existence is an insult. Surrender your ship and prepare to be boarded. Vasquez stood straighter. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Adamantine. we are in neutral space. Escorting civilian vessels, we have no quarrel with the Dominion, let us pass. The breath commander made a sound that might have been laughter. Neutral space. There is no neutral space, there is only space the Dominion has not yet claimed. Your kind spreads across the galaxy like disease. You build your little colonies. You breed like insects. You think you matter. He leaned closer to the screen. Tull, you do not matter. You are vermin. And today, vermin, you will learn your place. The screen went dark. They are powering weapons, Park said. Evasive maneuvers, Vasquez ordered. Return fire. When ready, the adamantine turned hard to port, her old hull groaning in protest. The first Verith shots missed by meters. The second volley hit the rear shields. The ship shook like a toy in a giant's hand. Alarms began to scream. Shields at 60%, Park reported. They are too fast. We cannot dodge them. All keep trying, Vasquez said. Fire everything we have at the lead. Destroyer, the adamantine's guns spoke. Plasma bolts and missiles streed. The ones that hit barely scratched the breath shields. It was like throwing rocks at a mountain. Another volley hit them. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the ship something exploded. Shields at 30%. Hull breach on deck 7. Emergency. Bulkheads are holding. Vasquez gripped the armrest of her chair. They were dying. Slowly but surely they were dying. She had known it would happen this way. She had just hoped to buy more time, and then something changed. The breath ship stopped firing. They stopped moving. They just hung there in space, surrounding the adamantine like wolves around a wounded deer. What are they doing? Torres asked. I do not know, Park said. He was staring at his console with confusion. They have powered down their weapons, but they are charging something else, some kind of device on the battle cruiser. I have never seen readings like this. Vasquez felt a chill run down her spine. Get us out of here. Maximum speed. Now. But it was too late. A beam of pale blue light shot out from the breath battle cruiser. It did not hit the adamantine. It passed through her like she was not even there, and in its wake everything stopped. The lights went out. Engines went silent. The consoles went dark. The artificial gravity failed, and Vasquez found herself floating out of her chair. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in dim red. Report, Vasquez said. Her voice sounded strange in the sudden silence. There was no hum of machinery, no whisper of air circulation, nothing. I do not know, Park said. He was fumbling with his console, pressing buttons that did nothing. Everything is dead. Main power, backup power, batteries, everything. It is like they just turned us off. Life support, Vasquez asked. Dead, and we have whatever air is in the ship right now. Maybe 12 hours worth if we are careful. Maybe less. Weapons dead, engines dead. Communications. Park just shook his head. Vasquez floated there in the darkness, surrounded by her helpless crew. The adamantine was dead, not destroyed, not damaged beyond repair, just dead. Every system, every circuit, every piece of technology they had turned off like a light switch. The breath had done something impossible. They had killed their ship without firing a single shot. And then the communication screen flickered to life, just that one screen, powered by something the breath were sending. The commander's face appeared again, and this time he was smiling. It was not a pleasant smile. Do you understand now, vermin? This is the Cascade Disruptor. a weapon your primitive minds cannot comprehend. It does not destroy, it does not damage, it simply ends. Every system on your ship has been reduced to dead matter. Your weapons, your engines, your life support all gone. Vasquez found her voice. Why? If you wanted to kill us, you could have just destroyed us. The breath commander's smile widened. Because destruction is too quick, too merciful. Your kind needs to learn what it means to challenge the dominion. So, we will let you drift. We will let you watch your air run out. We will let you freeze as your heat bleeds into the void. And when you are all dead, we will return. We will collect your bodies and display them in the Hall of Conquered Vermin, where all the galaxy can see what happens to those who forget their place. He leaned back satisfied. We will return in 3 solar cycles. By then you will be nicely preserved. Frozen meat in a metal box, a monument to human arrogance. The screen went dark again. Vasquez floated in the silence, her mind racing. 3 days. They had 3 days before the breath came back. 3 days with no power, no heat, no air recycling. 3 days to freeze to death in the dark. Around her she could hear her crew breathing. 340 people trapped in a metal coffin waiting to die. Some of them were crying, some of them were praying, some of them were just staring at nothing, already accepting their fate. But Vasquez was not ready to accept anything. Listen to me, she said. Her voice was not loud, but in the silence everyone heard her. We are not dead. Yet we are still breathing. We are still thinking. And then as long as that is true, we have a chance. How? Someone asked. It was Chen, the chief engineer. He had floated up from the engine room, his face covered in grease and shock. Everything is dead, Captain. I have never seen anything like this. It is not just that the power is off. The circuits themselves have been changed, scrambled at the molecular level. I cannot fix this. No one can fix this. Then we will find another way, Vasquez said. We have 340 of the most stubborn, creative, pig-headed humans in this sector. We have 3 days and we have one thing the breath do not expect. What is that? Chen asked. Vasquez looked at him, and despite everything, she smiled. We have absolutely nothing to lose, and wait, and humans are most dangerous when they have nothing to lose. She pushed off a console and floated toward the door. All senior staff, meet me in the cargo bay. We are going to go through every piece of equipment on this ship, every crate, every container, every forgotten box in every corner. If there is anything on this ship that still works, we are going to find it, and then we are going to figure out how to use it. For what? Torres asked. Vasquez paused at the door. She looked back at her bridge crew, at their frightened faces lit by dim red emergency lights outside the viewport. She could see the breath fleet holding position, patient as death. They thought they had won. They thought the humans were just going to float here and die like good little vermin. They were wrong. For revenge, Vasquez said, or survival, or both. Right now I will take either. She pushed through the door and floated into the dark corridor beyond. Behind her, one by one, her crew followed. They were scared. They were cold. They were facing impossible odds. But they were human, and humans had been facing impossible odds since they first climbed down from the trees and looked up at the stars. It was basically their specialty. The breath had made a mistake. They had not just trapped the crew of the Adamantine, they had backed them into a corner. They had taken away Every option except the most desperate one, and desperate humans, as the galaxy was about to learn, were very dangerous things indeed. In the cold darkness of the dead ship, Captain Elena Vasquez began to plan. The first hour was the hardest. Without gravity, everything floated. Without lights, everything was shadow, and without air circulation, the ship began to smell like fear and sweat, and the chemical tang of leaking systems. The crew moved through the corridors using handholds and push-offs, guided by chemical light sticks that cast a sickly green glow. Vasquez organized search teams. Every deck, every room, every storage compartment had to be checked. They were looking for anything that might still work. Mechanical tools, chemical batteries, anything that did not rely on the ship's power grid. The results were not encouraging. The Cascade disruptor had been thorough. Even flashlights were dead, even portable communicators, even the simple heating elements in the emergency suits. Whatever the breath had done, it had affected everything electronic, everything electrical, everything that used current or charge or power of any kind. But there were a few things that still worked. Chemical light sticks, which were just tubes of reactive compounds. Mechanical watches, the kind that wound with springs. Hand tools with no electrical components. And most importantly, the emergency oxygen canisters, which were purely mechanical pressure vessels. It is not much, Chen said, floating beside Vasquez in the main cargo bay. They had collected everything useful in one place. It made a small pile. We have maybe 500 light sticks, enough to last a week if we are careful. The oxygen canisters will give us air for maybe 2 days. After that, he shrugged. What about the cargo? Vasquez asked. We picked up something at Sigma 9. Classified. Nobody told me what it was. Chen's face changed. I forgot about that. It is in cargo bay 7, sealed container, short big warning labels. I was told not to ask questions. Then let us go ask some questions. They made their way through the ship. Temperature was already dropping. Without heating systems, the cold of space was seeping in through the hull. Vasquez could see her breath in the light stick glow. Some of the crew had wrapped themselves in blankets from the sleeping quarters. Others were huddling together for warmth. Cargo Bay 7 was in the lower section of the ship near the outer hull. The door was sealed, but without power, the locks did not work. Chen used a manual override to crank it open. The bay beyond was dark and cold, filled with standard shipping containers, but in the center, separate from everything else, was a different kind of container. It was black and featureless and with no markings except yellow warning stripes and a single word stankled in white letters. Prometheus. What do you think it is? Chen asked. Only one way to find out. Vasquez pulled herself over to the container. The seal was electronic, but someone had added a mechanical backup, a simple combination lock. She pulled out her personal tool kit and went to work. 20 minutes later, the seal clicked open. Inside the container, secured by mechanical clamps, was a device unlike anything Vasquez had ever seen. It was about the size of a ground car, covered in cables and cooling fins and warning labels. At its center was a sphere of some crystalline material that seemed to glow with its own faint light. Chen, Vasquez said slowly, please tell me you know what this is. Chen floated closer, his face pale in the green light. I have heard Rumors, theoretical stuff, mad scientist. Territory, he reached out and touched the device gently like it might bite him. If this is what I think it is, it should not exist, they said it was. Impossible, what is it? Chen looked at her and there was something in his eyes. That might have been fear or might have been wonder. It is a gravity lens, a device that can bend space itself. In theory, you could use it to create artificial gravity wells or to compress matter or to he stopped, or to what, or to destroy things, not just ships. Anything, everything. The simulation showed that a device like this, if it worked, could compress matter so completely that it would create a temporary singularity, a black hole that lasts for a fraction of a second before evaporating. He swallowed hard. The tests were cancelled. How, they said it was too unstable, too dangerous. It did not just destroy the target, it destroyed everything nearby, including the ship that fired it. Vasquez stared at the device. It sat there in its container, innocent and terrifying. Weapon that should not exist, a weapon that had been deemed too horrible to use, a weapon that was being transported to be destroyed, and now it was the only thing on the ship that might still work. Chen Vasquez said, "Can we make it fire, Captain? You do not understand. Even if we could make it work, it would kill us too. The blast radius in the simulations was enormous. We would be right in the middle of it. The breath are going to kill us anyway, at least this way we take them with us." Chen opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked at the device again. He looked at the dark, a cold cargo bay. Around them, he thought about his crew, slowly freezing to death, waiting for the breath to come back and collect their bodies. "I will need help," he said. Finally, Dr. Tanaka from the science team, she worked on theoretical physics before she joined the fleet, and I will need time and tools and probably a miracle. Vasquez put her hand on his shoulder. "You have 3 days. I will get you everything else you need." She turned and pushed toward the door. Behind her, Chen was already examining the device, muttering to himself, his engineer's mind starting to work on the problem. It was insane. It was impossible. It was probably going to kill them all, but it was also a chance. And right now, a chance was more than they had 5 minutes ago. The Wraith thought they were watching vermin die slowly in a trap. They were wrong when they were watching humans do what humans do best. They were watching them refuse to give up, and in the cold darkness of a dead ship surrounded by enemies, running out of air and time and hope, that refusal was the most dangerous weapon of all. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had spent 15 years studying things that should not exist. She had written papers on theoretical physics that made other scientists uncomfortable. She had proposed ideas that her colleagues called interesting in the way that people called dangerous animals interesting. And now she was floating in a frozen cargo bay, staring at something that proved all her wildest theories were true. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Chen floated beside her, shivering in the cold. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees since they found the device. "It is a bomb, a very complicated bomb." "It is not a bomb. It is a lens, a way to bend space itself." Tanaka moved closer, her breath forming clouds in the green light stick glow. "See this crystal at the center? It is not glass. It is not mineral. It is compressed space, frozen geometry. Someone figured out how to take the fabric of reality and turn it into a solid object. Can you make it work?" Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. She reached out and touched the crystal. It was warm despite the freezing air around them, warm like a living thing. The device is intact, she said finally. The cascade disruptor did not affect it. Because it does not use conventional power, it uses something else, something the breath probably do not even know exists. She turned to face Chen, but there is a problem. Of course there is. The device was designed to be powered by a starship reactor. We do not have that. We do not have any power at all. To activate the lens, we need an enormous amount of energy delivered in a single pulse. Without that, the crystal is just an expensive paperweight. Chen's face fell. Then it is useless. I did not say that. Tanaka pushed off and floated to a workbench that had been set up in the cargo bay. Someone had gathered tools. They're the mechanical kind that still worked. Wrenches and screwdrivers and hammers, primitive tools for a primitive solution. There might be another way. The crystal does not need power to maintain its structure. It only needs power to activate, like a spark to start a fire. Where are we going to find a spark? Everything electronic is dead. Not everything. Tanaka smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had just seen the answer to a very hard puzzle. The emergency beacon. It has a capacitor, a big one, designed to send distress signals across star systems. The cascade disruptor killed the transmitter, but the capacitor is just a device that stores electricity. It might still have a charge. Chen's eyes widened. That capacitor could kill someone if it discharged wrong. It could also kill a fleet of Wrath ships if it discharged right. They stared at each other for a moment. The idea was insane. It was cobbled together from desperate hope and theoretical physics. It had 1,000 ways to go wrong and maybe one way to go right. I need to talk to the captain, Chen said. Captain Vasquez listened to their explanation in the dim red light of the bridge around them, and the surviving bridge crew floated at their useless stations, listening with expressions that range from hope to terror. Let me understand this, Vasquez said when they finished. You want to wire a doomsday weapon to a battery pointed at the breath and hope it does not kill us all. That is a simple way to put it, Tanaka said. But yes, what are our chances? Tanaka hesitated. The original simulation showed a 97% chance of destruction for anything within the blast radius. That includes us, so 3% chance of survival. Approximately. Vasquez nodded slowly. She looked around the bridge. Her crew looked back at her. They were cold, they were scared, they were slowly dying, but there was something else in their eyes now. Something that had not been there an hour ago. Hope, dangerous, desperate. Hope, what do you need? Vasquez asked. People, Chen said, as many as you can spare. We need to move the device to the outer cargo bay door. We need to strip the emergency beacon and salvage the capacitor. We need to build a triggering mechanism that works without electricity. And we need to do all of this in the dark, in zero gravity, in temperatures that are going to keep dropping. Time, the breath said 3 days. We need at least 2, maybe more. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Outside the viewport, she could see the breath fleet. They had spread out around the adamantine, forming a loose sphere, watching, waiting, enjoying the show. There is something else, Vasquez said. We need to aim this thing. Right now we are tumbling slightly. We need to point the cargo bay door directly at the breath formation. Can we do that without engines? Chen thought about it. Maybe if we vent atmosphere from specific points on the hull, we can create thrust, very small amounts, but in zero gravity even small amounts matter. It would be like steering a boat by spitting over the side. Can you calculate the venting pattern? I can try, but Captain, every time we vent atmosphere, we lose air. Air we cannot replace. Vasquez smiled grimly. If this works, we will not need the air. If it does not work, we will not need it either. Get started. I will organize the work crews. She pushed off toward the door, then paused. Dr. Tanaka. Chen, I want you to understand something. I'm not asking you to build a weapon. I'm asking you to build a chance, now the only chance we have. So whatever you need, you get. Whatever rules you need to break, break them. I will deal with the consequences, if there are any consequences to deal with. She left the bridge. Behind her, Tanaka and Chen looked at each other. She is remarkable, Tanaka said softly. She is terrified, Chen replied. She just hides it better than the rest of us. Come on, we have work to do. The next several hours were organized chaos. Vasquez divided the crew into teams, each with a specific task. One team began moving the gravity lens device from Cargo Bay 7 to the larger Cargo Bay 3, which had the biggest external door. Without gravity, the device floated freely, but it was massive. It took 20 people using ropes and muscle power to guide it through the corridors. Another team went to work on the emergency beacon. The beacon was located in the communication section, bolted to the hull. The cascade disruptor had killed its transmitter and control circuits, but the capacitor was a simpler device. Just two metal plates separated by an insulating material holding an electrical charge. It should still work. Should Chen supervise the capacitor extraction personally? It was delicate work. The capacitor held enough energy to power the beacon for days of continuous transmission. That same energy released all at once could stop a human heart or start a fire in an oxygen-rich environment. In zero gravity, a fire could spread in any direction. In a ship with limited air, it would be catastrophic. Slowly, Chen said as his team worked. Slowly, one wrong move and we all die. Slightly ahead of schedule. Capacitor came free after 2 hours of careful work. It was the size of a small suitcase, heavier than it looked. Chen carried it to Cargo Bay 3 personally, treating it like a bomb, which in a way it was. Meanwhile, Tanaka was working on the theoretical problems. She had gathered a small team of scientists and engineers, the ship's best technical minds. They huddled in a corner of the Cargo Bay, scratching equations on paper with pencils because all the electronic tablets were dead. Paper because it was the only writing surface that still worked. The lens creates a focused gravity pulse, Tanaka explained, drawing diagrams by light stick glow. It compresses everything in its path. The compression is temporary but extreme. We are talking about forces that can turn solid metal into plasma and then compress that plasma into something denser than a neutron star. What happens when it hits something? One of the engineers asked. In theory, total conversion of matter to energy. The target does not explode. It does not disintegrate. It simply stops being matter and becomes something else. Burst of radiation and exotic particles. And what about the ship firing it? Tanaka hesitated. The lens is supposed to focus the effect in one direction. Like a flashlight, but the original prototypes had leakage energy that went backward as well as forward. In the simulation, the firing vessel was always destroyed, always 97% of the time. That is not always, no, in 3% of the simulations when the backward leakage was minimal enough that the ship survived damage but intact. What made the difference in those 3%? Tanaka looked at her equations, distance and angle. The further you are from your own blast, the better, and if you can create any kind of barrier between the lens and your ship. She stopped, her eyes went wide. What? Chen asked. What is it? The cargo bay door. If we mount the lens, the cargo bay, and fire it through the open door, the ship itself becomes a partial shield. The hull behind the lens would absorb some of the backward energy. Some is better than none. Tanaka started scribbling new equations. Yes, this could work if we position the lens at the outer edge of the cargo bay. If we open the door just before firing, if the angle is exactly right, what are the odds then? Tanaka looked up. Her face was hard to read in the dim light. Maybe 10%. Maybe 15. It is hard to say. Without proper calculations, and I cannot do proper calculations without a computer. 15%. It was 5 times better than before. It was still not good, but it was something. Keep working, Chen said. I'm going to figure out how to wire this thing to the capacitor. As the hours passed, the temperature continued to drop. Frost began to form on the metal surfaces. The crew worked in layers of clothing, their fingers growing numb from the cold. Some people wrapped rags around their hands to keep working. Others took breaks, huddling together for warmth before returning to their tasks. The medical team, led by Dr. Sarah Webb, had a different job, or they were trying to keep everyone alive long enough to finish the work. Hypothermia is already setting in, Webb reported to Vasquez during one of their brief meetings. The body temperature of the crew is dropping steadily. We have maybe 30 hours before people start dying from the cold. What can you do? Not much. We are rationing the heat packs from the emergency kits. We are having people rotate through exercise sessions to generate body heat, and I have started putting some of the wounded into induced hypothermia. Vasquez blinked. How does making them colder help? It slows their metabolism. They use less oxygen, less energy. It is like putting them on pause. Webb's face was grim. We have 43 wounded from the attack. Some of them will not survive either way, but by lowering their body temperature, and we can extend their time, give them a chance to see whether we live or die. How many can you save? Maybe 30, maybe fewer. The others? Webb shook her head. The others are too far gone. Internal injuries, radiation damage, trauma. Without proper medical facilities, they do not have long. Vasquez closed her eyes. 43 wounded, and she might lose more than a dozen of them. Add that to the crew members who had died in the initial attack, and her ship of 340 was already down to 302 by the time this was over. It might be fewer. Do what you can, she said. Keep as many people alive as possible. And doctor, thank you for everything. Webb nodded and pushed off to return to her patients in cargo bay 3. The gravity lens now sat in its new position, waist secured by mechanical clamps to the deck plating near the outer door. It looked wrong there, like a piece of alien technology that had Grown from the floor, the crystal at its center still glowed faintly, the only real light in the entire ship that did not come from a chemical light stick. Chen had spent hours studying the device, tracing its system, trying to understand how it worked. The engineering was beyond anything he had seen before. It was like looking at technology from 1,000 years in the future or from another dimension entirely, but the triggering mechanism was simpler. The lens needed a spark, pulse of energy to activate the crystal. The original designers had used a ship's reactor for this. Chen was going to use a battery. The capacitor goes here, he explained to his team, he pointing to a junction on the device's frame. We need to connect it to these input nodes. When the charge releases, it will flow through the crystal and activate the lens. How do we trigger the release? Manually. I am going to build a simple switch of physical contact that completes the circuit when pressed. He held up a piece of metal he had been shaping, crude, but it should work. Should at this point everything is. Should Chen went back to work, his hands were shaking from the cold and he had to keep stopping to warm them against his body, but he kept working. Around him, the rest of the crew worked too. Some were reinforcing the clamps, holding the device in place. Others were preparing the cargo bay door for manual operation. Without power, they would have to crank it open by hand, using a mechanical backup system that probably had not been tested in years. Still, others were working on the ship's orientation. Chen's calculations had given them a venting pattern that should rotate the adamantine slowly until the cargo bay pointed at the breath formation. Teams moved through the ship, opening specific valves to release atmosphere in careful, measured bursts. Each burst was a loss of precious air. Each burst brought them closer to suffocation, but each burst also brought them closer to alignment. It was like trying to aim a gun by blowing on it. Ridiculous, impossible, stupid, human. Hours passed, the temperature dropped. People worked and rested and worked again. The light sticks began to fade, and they had to start rationing them. Too soon much of the ship was in complete darkness, much with only the critical work area still lit. Vasquez made rounds, moving from section to section, talking to her crew. She memorized their names, their faces, their fears. She told them they were going to survive. She told them help was coming. She lied and they knew she was lying, but they appreciated it anyway. In the medical bay, the first casualties occurred. 2 of the wounded died in the early hours of the second day. Their injuries were too severe, their bodies too cold. Dr. Webb recorded their deaths in a handwritten log and moved on to the patients she could still save. In cargo Bay 3, Chen finished the triggering mechanism. It was a simple thing, a metal contact attached to a long pole. When the pole was pushed, the contact would touch the capacitor terminal, completing the circuit and releasing the charge into the lens. Or that is it? Tanaka asked, looking at the makeshift switch. That is it. We point this thing at the FHTH. Someone pushes the pole, and either we all die or they all die. Chen laughed weakly. Actually, probably we all die either way, but at least we take them with us. Who pushes the pole? Chen was quiet for a moment. Someone who does not mind dying a few seconds before everyone else. Someone fast who can push and then get behind cover before the lens fires. Is their cover good enough? No, probably not, but it is better than standing in front of the thing. They both looked at the gravity lens. It said, "They're glowing faintly, waiting, a weapon. That should not exist, built by people who had decided it was too dangerous to use. Now it was their only hope. I will do it," Tanaka said. "No, I will, Chen. You have a family, a wife, children on Colony 4, and you have a lifetime of research papers that need to be written, discoveries that need to be made." Tanaka smiled sadly. "My research is sitting right there. This is my life's work, my theory made real. If I am going to die, I would rather die proving that I was right all along." Before Chen could argue, Vasquez's voice came over the ship's ancient intercom system. They had gotten the mechanical backup working, at least for simple announcements. "All hands, this is the captain. We have achieved alignment. The cargo bay is now pointed at the breath formation. Chen, Tanaka, report to the bridge immediately. It is time to decide if we are actually doing this." Chen and Tanaka looked at each other one more time, then they pushed off toward the bridge, leaving the gravity lens behind them. Boy, it sat in the cold darkness, glowing softly, waiting for someone to wake it up, waiting to destroy or be destroyed. The weapon that should not exist was ready. Now they just needed the courage to use it. The bridge meeting was short. There was not much to discuss. Everyone understood the situation. Everyone understood the odds. And everyone understood that there was no other choice. We have approximately 68 hours remaining before the breath return. Vasquez said, "Current estimates give us 52 hours of breathable air if we continue normal operations, less if we keep venting for course corrections." "Device is ready," Chen reported. "At least we think it is ready. We have no way to test it without actually firing it, and if we fire it and it does not work, then we die a few hours earlier than we would have anyway, you know." And the breath laugh at us. Vasquez nodded. That was about what she had expected. "Dr. Tanaka, what about the calculations?" "I have done everything I can with paper and pencil," Tanaka said. "The math suggests we have somewhere between 10 and 20% chance of survival if we fire from inside the cargo bay with a ship acting as a partial shield. But these are rough estimates. The real answer could be higher or lower or zero. 20% is better than zero," Lieutenant Park said, "which is what we have right now." "Agreed." Vasquez looked around at her officers. They were all there, floating in the dim red light. Park at sensors, Tours at communications, Chen from engineering, Tanaka from science, Webb from medical. Her command team, her family. "Does anyone have any objections to proceeding?" No one spoke. "Aaron, does anyone have any alternative suggestions?" Still silent. "Then we proceed." Vasquez took a deep breath. "We have 68 hours. We spend the next 48 refining everything we can refine, checking everything we can check, making sure that when we pull that trigger, we give ourselves the best possible chance. The last 20 hours we prepare for either survival or death." "Any questions? Who pulls the trigger?" Tours asked quietly. Vasquez hesitated. She had been thinking about this question for hours. "I do. It is my ship, my crew, my responsibility." "Captain, with respect, that is stupid." Chen said, "You are needed here. If this works and we survive, we are going to have a damaged ship full of injured people. They will need you. Then who?" "I will do it," Tanaka said again. "Sodium, I already volunteered. So did I," Chen added. "I will do it," Park said. "I am the fastest. I can push the trigger and get behind cover in less than 2 seconds. Cover will not help, Tanaka pointed out. If the backward blast is strong enough, nothing on this ship will protect you. Then it does not matter who does it. Park replied, we all have the same chance. Vasquez held up her hand. Enough. We have 48 hours to figure this out. Let us focus on the work first. We can argue about who gets to die later. The meeting broke up. Everyone went back to their tasks. The clock was ticking, and every second mattered. In cargo bay 3, the real work began. The gravity lens needed to be stabilized. The makeshift mounting had worked well enough when the ship was not moving, but if they opened the cargo bay door, there would be pressure changes, air rushing out. The device might shift, might turn, might point in the wrong direction at the critical moment. Chen's team built a frame around the lens. They used metal from the walls, from broken equipment, from anything they could find. They welded it together using chemical welding compounds, the kind that created heat through chemical reactions rather than electricity. It was slow work, and the welds were not as strong as proper electric welds, but they held. Meanwhile, another team worked on the cargo bay door. The door was designed to be operated by hydraulic systems powered by the ship's main grid. Without power, those systems were dead, but there was a manual backup, a series of cranks and gears that could open the door using pure muscle power. The backup had not been used in years. The gears were stiff with old lubricant. The cranks were hard to turn. A team of 6 people worked for hours, forcing the mechanism through its rotation, freeing it up so it would work when they needed it. How long to open the door? Vasquez asked during one of her inspection rounds. About 30 seconds. If everyone cranks at full speed, the team leader reported. Maybe longer if people are tired or cold. They will be tired and cold. Plan for 60 seconds. Yes, Captain. In the medical bay, Dr. Webb faced a different challenge. Wounded were dying, not all of them, but too many, without power for proper medical equipment, without heat, without proper supplies. She was fighting a losing battle. I need to make choices, she told Vasquez during a quiet moment. We do not have enough resources to save everyone. I need to decide who we focus on and who we do not. Vasquez felt something twist in her chest. How do you make that decision? Likelihood of survival. Some of the wounded have injuries that would take days of intensive care to heal. We do not have days. We do not have intensive care. So I focus on the ones I can save with what we have. How many? 22 have a good chance. If we focus everything on them, 14 more might survive if we get to proper facilities within 24 hours of rescue. The rest, Webb's voice cracked slightly. The rest will not make it no matter what we do. Do what you have to do, Vasquez said, and Webb, do not blame yourself. Blame the breath. The doctor nodded and returned to her patients. Behind her, in the quiet corners of the medical bay, crew members sat with the dying, holding their hands, talking to them, keeping them company during their final hours. There were 43 wounded after the attack. By the end of the second day, there were 31. 12 people died in the darkness, surrounded by shipmates who could not save them. Vasquez made sure she knew every name. As the hours passed, the cold grew worse. The ship's internal temperature had dropped to near freezing. Ice crystals formed on the walls. The crew's breath came out in thick clouds. Some people stopped feeling cold, which was actually a bad sign. It meant their bodies were shutting down, conserving heat for vital organs. The medical team taught everyone the signs of severe hypothermia: confusion, slurred speech, loss of coordination. If someone showed these signs, they were supposed to report to the medical bay immediately, but some people did not report. They kept working, kept pushing, kept ignoring their bodies' warnings. They knew they were dying slowly. They also knew the work was more important than their comfort. That was the human way. When the situation was impossible, they just worked harder. In Cargo Bay 3, Tanaka and her science team made a discovery. The lens has a focusing mechanism, she announced during a late night conference. I did not understand it at first because it is so different from human technology, but I think I can adjust it, narrow the beam, make it more precise. What does that mean in practical terms? Vasquez asked. It means we might be able to reduce the backward blast, not eliminate it, but reduce it. The energy that would have scattered in all directions gets focused forward. Instead, walk toward the target. How much reduction? Tanaka hesitated. I do not know. The adjustments are delicate, and I am working blind without proper instruments, but even a 10% reduction in backward energy could double our survival chances. Then do it. Tanaka went to work. She spent hours with her hands inside the device, adjusting components she barely understood, using tools that were not designed for the job. It was like performing surgery with a hammer and chisel. Every adjustment was a guess. Every guess could be wrong. But she kept working. Meanwhile, Chen focused on the triggering mechanism. Simple switch he had built would work. But it was rough. There was a chance it would not make proper contact. A chance the charge would not transfer completely. A chance the whole thing would fail at the critical moment. When he rebuilt it 3 times, each version slightly better than the last, the final version used hamperless contact points and a spring-loaded mechanism that would ensure a solid connection. It was still crude by normal standards, but by the standards of a dead ship with no power and no tools, it was a masterpiece. How confident are you? Vasquez asked, examining the trigger. 70% confident it will work as intended, maybe 80, and the other 20%. The charge might not transfer fully. The lens might activate at partial power, which could be worse than not activating at all, or the capacitor might have degraded in storage, and there might not be enough charge to activate anything. What about the capacitor exploding? Chen smiled grimly. That is actually the least likely problem. The capacitor is very stable. It would take serious physical damage to make it discharge uncontrollably. Small blessings. As the hours counted down, something strange began to happen. On the adamantine, the crew, despite everything, began to come together in ways they never had before. In normal times, the ship was divided by rank and department. Officers stayed with officers, engineers stayed with engineers. There were invisible walls between different groups, the kind that exist on every ship and in every organization. Now those walls were gone. In the main corridor, a group of people from different departments worked together to reinforce a weak section of hull. An officer and an enlisted man shared body heat under the same blanket. A scientist helped to cook, repair crucial piece of equipment. A pilot comforted a frightened maintenance worker. Hey, they were not crew members Anymore they were family, a family. Facing death together, Vasquez noticed. This changed during her rounds. She saw people helping each other without being asked. She saw kindness in the most unlikely places. She saw fear being replaced by determination. We are going to make it, one young crew member told her. He was barely 20, assigned to the sensor team. His name was Rodriguez, and he was shivering so badly he could barely speak. I believe it. We are going to make it. What makes you so sure? Because we are human, Rodriguez said, and humans do not give up. My grandmother used to say that. She survived the colony for famine when she was young. Everyone thought they were going to die, but they did not give up. And they made it through. She always said that is what makes us different. Other species accept their fate. Humans fight it. Vasquez patted his shoulder. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She died last year, but I think she would be proud of us right now. Vasquez moved on, but Rodriguez's words stayed with her. Humans do not give up. It was such a simple idea, such a basic truth, and yet it was the only reason any of them were still alive. Third day began with a death. Private First Class Maria Santos, age 23, died of hypothermia at 3:47 hours. She had been working on the cargo bay door mechanism. She had not reported her symptoms. She had not asked for help. She had just kept working until her body gave out. They found her floating near the door, her hands still wrapped around a wrench, her eyes closed like she was sleeping. The cold had taken her so gently that she had not even realized it was happening. Vasquez held a brief service. There was no time for anything more. They wrapped Santos in a sheet and stored her body in one of the empty cargo containers. When this was over, she would be returned to her family. If this was over, 52 hours remaining. Vasquez announced after the service, we are on schedule. The device is ready. The door is ready. The ship is aligned. All that remains is the final preparations. She looked at her crew. They were exhausted, frozen, terrified. Many of them had not slept in days. Many of them were sick. All of them knew they might die in the next few hours, but none of them looked away. None of them gave up. I want everyone to take the next few hours to rest. Vasquez continued. Write letters to your families. I say prayers if that helps. Make peace with whatever needs making peace with. At 1,800 hours we begin final preparations. By 2,100 hours we will be ready to fire. The breath returned in approximately 20 hours after that. We will not give them the satisfaction of finding us dead. The crew dispersed. Some went to rest, some went to write, some went to say goodbye. In Cargo Bay 3, Chen made one final check of his work. Everything was in place. The gravity lens sat in its frame, pointing toward the cargo bay door. The capacitor was connected, its charge waiting to be released. The trigger was ready, its spring loaded, and its contacts polished. All they needed now was someone to push it. Chen sat down next to the device. The crystal at its center glowed softly, casting strange shadows on his face. He thought about his wife who back on Colony 4. He thought about his children growing up without him. He thought about all the things he had wanted to do with his life that he would never get to do. Then he thought about the FH, about their arrogance, about their cruelty, about the way they had called humans vermin and left them to freeze, and he smiled. Even if this did not work, even if they All died, they would die fighting. They would die trying, they would die as humans, stubborn and dangerous, and absolutely refusing to accept their fate. That was worth something. Maybe it was worth everything. Tanaka floated over and sat beside him, nervous. Terrified me too. She looked at the device. Beautiful, is it not? In a terrible way. I was thinking the same thing. They sat there together watching the glow, showing, waiting for the moment when everything would change. Outside the ship, the Breath Fleet continued its patient vigil. They had no idea what was happening inside the adamantine. They had no idea that the vermin they were watching were not giving up. They had no idea that in a few hours they would face something they had never seen before, a human weapon built from desperation and genius and pure stubborn refusal to die. The countdown continued, the clock ticked, and in the frozen darkness of a dead ship, humanity prepared to teach the galaxy a lesson. Never corner a human, never take away their hope, never assume they will give up, because when humans have nothing left to lose, they become something far more dangerous than any weapon. They become themselves. 60th hour arrived like a slow executioner. On the bridge of the adamantine, Captain Elena Vasquez watched the Breath Fleet through the frost-covered viewport. They had not moved in 2 days. They did not need to move. They were patient predators, content to wait while their prey died. Slowly, but something was changing. The Breath ships were shifting position. Destroyers were moving closer. The battle cruiser was powering up its engines. They are coming, Park reported from his dead sensor station. He was tracking the enemy ships by eye, using a simple telescope mounted to the viewport. Earlier than expected. How much earlier? 8 hours, maybe 7. Vasquez felt her stomach tighten. They were not ready. The final preparations were supposed to take another 4 hours. If the Breath arrived now, get Chen and Tanaka, she ordered. Emergency meeting now. 5 minutes later, the command team floated in the bridge, their breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Breath are coming early, Vasquez said. We need to accelerate our timeline. We cannot, Chen protested. The final calibrations are not complete. The door mechanism needs one more test run. The venting pattern for last second alignment corrections is not finalized. Make it work, Vasquez cut him off. We have 7 hours, maybe less. Whatever is not ready by then will have to be good enough. Chen opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He nodded. Understood. Captain, what about the Breath? Tours asked. Why are they coming early? They said 3 days. Maybe they got bored, Park said, or maybe they want to record our desk for propaganda, or maybe they just decided to speed things up. It does not matter why, Vasquez said. What matters is that they are coming, and we need to be ready. She turned to her officers. Everyone to your stations. Chen, get to the cargo bay and finish whatever you can finish. Tanaka, I need those calibrations done in 3 hours. Park, keep tracking those ships. Tours, I want everyone on the ship ready to move on my command. The team dispersed. Vasquez stayed on the bridge, watching the enemy fleet grow larger in the viewport. On the VHT battle cruiser, dominance of purpose, Commander VTH Karn was pleased with himself. The hunt had gone perfectly. The human vessel was drifting helplessly, its pathetic crew slowly freezing to death. Soon he would have fresh trophies for the Hall of Conquered Vermin, but waiting was boring. 3 Solar cycles was too long, his crew was getting restless, some of the junior officers were complaining about the delay. And more importantly, VTH Karn had received word from high command that another fleet wanted to claim this victory for themselves. He would not allow that. These were his kills, his trophies, his glory. Move us closer, he ordered his navigation officer. I want to see their faces when they realize we are here early. I want to record their despair for the archives. Yes. Commander, how close visual range? I want them to see our ship with their own eyes. I want them to understand how small they are. The dominance of purpose surged forward, its massive engines pushing it toward the helpless human ship. The escort vessels followed, forming a perfect formation around their flagship. It was a display of power in a dominance of absolute superiority. Bethkarn smiled. The humans would see his ship and know that all their hopes were meaningless. They would spend their final hours in total despair. That was the proper way to treat vermin on the adamantine. The early arrival of the FTH created chaos. Teams that had been working methodically now rushed through their tasks. Mistakes were made, corrected, made again. The careful timeline Vasquez had established crumbled, but humans are good at chaos. They adapt, they improvise, they make things work even when everything is going wrong. In Cargo Bay 3, Chen finished his final modifications to the trigger mechanism in record time. It was not perfect, but it would work probably. He hoped. Done, he announced over the intercom. The device is as ready as it is going to get. The door mechanism, Vasquez asked. One more test run. Give me 20 minutes. You have 10. Chen's team scrambled to the door controls. They had rebuilt the manual backup 3 times. Now, replacing broken gears and stiff springs, the mechanism worked in theory. Now they needed to prove it worked in practice. On my count, the team leader said 3, 2, 1, crank. 6 people grabbed the manual cranks and began turning them as fast as they could. The door groaned. Metal scraped against metal. The gear slipped, caught again, and slowly, painfully, the cargo bay door began to open. Cold air rushed out. Pressure dropped. Everyone grabbed for handholds as the ship suddenly had a new way to vent atmosphere. Keep going, Chen shouted. Full open. We need to know it will go all the way. The door continued to open. Stars appeared through the widening gap. The cold of space hit them like a physical force, stealing whatever warmth remained in their bodies. Finally, the door locked in the full open position. 38 seconds. Someone reported, faster than our best practice run. Good. Chen examined the mechanism. Everything looks solid. Close it up. We do not want to lose any more air than we have to. The cranks turned in reverse. The door closed. The cargo bay sealed. Door mechanism confirmed operational. Chen reported to the bridge. We are ready, but Tanaka was not ready. In our makeshift workspace near the gravity lens, she was still working on the focusing adjustments. The math was not cooperating. Every time she thought she had it figured out, something else went wrong. I need more time, she muttered, scratching equations on a piece of metal with a piece of carbon. The harmonics are not right. The beam focus is off by 3%. 3% could mean the difference between survival and Tanaka. Chen floated up beside her. We do not have more time. The breath are at visual range. Look, he pointed toward the viewport. Through the Frost, they could see it now, the breath. Battle cruiser, enormous and terrible. Moving toward them like a mountain. Through space, its running lights blazed. With cold blue fire, its weapons ports gleamed. How close, Tanaka whispered. Close enough that we can see details. Close enough that they can see us, close. Enough that if we do not fire soon, they will be too close to miss us if the blast goes both ways. Tanaka looked at her equations and they were not complete, the adjustments were not perfect, everything was just slightly wrong, and in a system this complex, slightly wrong could be disastrous, but she had run out of time. Calculations are as good as they can be, she said finally. The focusing is optimized for current conditions. If the breath moved closer, the geometry changes and I would need to redo everything. Then we fire now, we fire. Now, Tanaka took a deep breath, or we die. Without trying, and I did not spend 2 days doing math in the dark just to die. Without trying, on the bridge Vasquez received the news. The device was ready. The door was ready, the ship was aligned. All that remained was the trigger. Tor's shipwide announcement. Channel open, Captain. Vasquez took a moment to gather her thoughts. Outside the viewport, Edth battle cruiser continued its approach. It was so close. Now she could make out individual hull plates, so close she could see the weapons arrays that had disabled her ship. All hands, she said. This is the captain. The moment we have been working toward is here. In approximately 15 minutes we will attempt to fire the gravity lens. You all know what that means. You all know the risks. I will not insult you by pretending this is going to be easy or safe. She paused, looking at her bridge crew. Park at sensors, Tors at communications, others at their stations, all of them watching her. I want you to know something. These past 3 days have been the worst of my life, and also the best. I have watched this crew do impossible things. I have watched you work without sleep, without heat, without hope. I have watched you refuse to give up even when giving up would have been easier. Her voice cracked slightly. She forced it steady. Whatever happens next, I am proud of every single one of you. If we die today, we die as humans, stubborn, dangerous, completely unwilling to accept our fate. And if we live, she smiled grimly, if we live, we are going to make the breath regret the day they decided to call us vermin. She straightened up. All hands to survival positions. Cargo bay team, prepare for door operation. Tanaka Chen, get to the trigger. On my mark, we show these aliens what humanity is made of. She closed the channel and looked at Tors. Get me the breath. Commander, audio and visual. I want him to see this coming. The screen flickered to life. Commander VTHKN appeared, his scarred face twisted with amusement. To human. Captain, he said, I see you are still alive. How disappointing. I was hoping to find frozen corpses by now. Sorry to disappoint you, Vasquez replied. I wanted to give you a message before the end. A message? How charming. What could vermin possibly have to say to their betters? Vasquez smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had been pushed too far and was finally pushing back. You made a mistake, she said, when you disabled our ship. You thought you were teaching us a lesson. You thought we would drift here and die and prove that humans are weak. But you forgot something. And what is that? You forgot what happens when you back a human into a corner. You forgot that we have been fighting impossible Odd since we learned to stand upright. Adra, you forgot that we are the species that split atoms, walked on moons, and spread across the stars despite everything trying to stop us. VTH Karn laughed. Pretty words, but words do not change anything. You are still helpless. Your ship is still dead, and in a few hours you will all be frozen meat. No, Vasquez said. We will not. She turned to Torres, cut the transmission. The screen went dark. He is going to be confused about that, Park observed. Good, let him be confused. It is the last thing he will feel. Vasquez took a deep breath. Cargo bay team, prepare for door operation. Trigger team, stand by on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. In cargo bay 3. Everything happened at once. 6-person door team grabbed the manual cranks and began turning them with everything they had. The cargo bay door groaned open, releasing the last of the bay's atmosphere into space. Stars appeared through the widening gap. Chen grabbed the trigger pole, bracing himself against the nearest handhold. The trigger was simple. Push the pole, close the circuit, release the charge. Easy. His hands were shaking. Tanaka floated beside him, watching the door open. Wait for full extension, she said. The beam needs a clear path. The door continued to open. 20%, 30%, 50%. Outside, the breath battle cruiser filled the viewport. It was so close now that Chen could see the alien crew moving behind their own viewports. They were pointing at the adamantine, probably laughing at the pitiful humans who had opened their cargo bay for no apparent reason. They had no idea what was coming. 70%, 80%. I'm almost there. Tanaka breathed. Almost. The door locked in the full open position. 38 seconds. Exactly as practiced, the cargo bay was now open to space with the gravity lens pointing directly at the breath fleet. Clear path confirmed, someone shouted from the door team. Fire at will. Chen looked at Tanaka. She looked back at him. Do it, she said. Chen pushed the pole. The metal contact touched the capacitor terminal. The circuit completed. Months of stored electrical energy rushed through the connection in a single instant, pouring into the gravity lens like water into a dry riverbed. The crystal at the center of the lens blazed with light, not the soft glow it had shown before, but a brilliant, terrible illumination that turned the entire cargo bay white. Space screamed. There was no sound in vacuum. See, but everyone on the adamantine heard it anyway, a sound that bypassed ears and went straight to the brain. The sound of reality being torn apart and put back together. Wrong. The beam shot out from the gravity lens like the finger of an angry god. It was not light, not exactly. It was something worse, something that bent and twisted everything it touched. It hit the breath battle cruiser. For one frozen instant, nothing happened. The dominance of purpose hung there in space, its hull gleaming, its weapons ready, its crew unaware that the universe had just changed. Then it collapsed. Not exploded, collapsed. The enormous ship crumpled like paper in a giant's fist. Hundreds of meters of advanced alien technology compressed into a space smaller than a human head, then smaller still, then smaller than an atom, and then it was gone. It's not destroyed, not damaged, just gone, converted from matter to something else entirely. Burst of exotic particles spreading out in all directions, but the beam did not stop there. It continued past the point where the battle cruiser had been. It passed through the escort ships, which collapsed and vanished just as quickly. It passed through the debris field from the original battle. It passed through empty space, and it hit the moon of a nearby gas giant. Vasquez saw it happen. From the bridge, the beam struck the moon's surface and kept going, plunging deep into the rock and ice. For a moment nothing happened, then the moon began to glow. The gravitational forces unleashed by the lens did not just destroy the surface, they compressed the core, they squeezed the very atoms of the moon until fusion began. Uncontrolled, violent fusion. More the moon became a sun just for a second, and then it exploded. The shock wave traveled outward at a significant fraction of light speed. It hit the remaining Verith ships first, the support vessels that had been too far from the initial beam to be destroyed. Directly, they did not stand a chance. The wall of energy and debris swept through them like a broom through dust. The asteroid belt was next. Millions of tons of rock and ice, vaporized or scattered or simply pushed aside by the force of the explosion, and then the shock wave reached the adamantine. The last thing Chen saw was the wall of light coming toward them. He had just enough time to throw himself behind the gravity lens, hoping its frame would provide some protection. Then everything went white on the bridge. Vasquez grabbed her chair as the ship bucked and spun on. Alarms that had been silent for 3 days suddenly came back to life. Screaming warnings about hull stress and thermal damage and a dozen other things. The viewports went opaque as safety shutters slammed into place. Temperature spiked dramatically as radiation poured through the hull. People screamed, and then as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The adamantine tumbled through space, battered and burned, but somehow impossibly still intact. The shock wave had passed. The worst of the energy had been deflected by the ship's position and the partial shield of the hull. They were alive. Damage report. Vasquez croaked. Her voice was raw, her throat dry. Someone give me a damage report. Working on it, Park said. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but his hands were already moving across his console. Captain, and I am getting readings. The sensors are working. Some of them anyway. What do you see? Park was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was filled with wonder. Nothing. I see nothing. The breath fleet is gone, all of it. The battle cruiser, the destroyers, the support ships gone. And Captain, the moon that was there before, it is not there anymore. Not there. It is an expanding cloud of debris. We hit the moon. We destroyed it. Vasquez closed her eyes. They had done it. They had actually done it. Weapon that should not exist, built by desperate humans with no power and no hope, had just vaporized an enemy fleet in a celestial body. The cargo bay team, she asked. Chen, Tanaka. There was a long silence. Then, crackling over the intercom, a familiar voice. This is Chen. We are alive down here. Tanaka is hurt, but she is breathing. The lens is, I think it is destroyed, burned out, but we are alive. Vasquez felt tears forming in her eyes. In the cold, they froze almost immediately, but she did not care. Chen, she said, you magnificent bastard, you did it. We did it, Chen corrected. All of us, every single person on this ship. We did it together. Outside in the void, where the VTH fleet had been, there was only dust and radiation and the scattered remains of a moon that no longer existed. The Dominion's most feared weapons had been turned to Nothing by a crippled human ship. The breath had called humans vermin. They had treated them as nothing, as beneath. Notice as prey. They had been very, very wrong. The hours after the firing were a blur of activity and exhaustion. The adamantine was alive, but barely. And the shock wave from the moon's destruction had damaged already weakened systems. New hull breaches had opened in 3 sections. The spin from the blast had left the ship tumbling end over end through space, but they were alive. Vasquez organized the survivors into repair teams. Without power, the repairs were crude at best. They used metal patches and chemical sealants to close the breaches. They used ropes and muscle to stop the spin, venting what little atmosphere they could spare in careful bursts until the ship stabilized. In the medical bay, Dr. Webb worked with renewed energy. The blast had caused new injuries, burns, and broken bones, and radiation sickness, but it had also given her something she had not had before: hope. We have maybe 18 hours of air left, she reported to Vasquez. That is if we are lucky. If we are not lucky, less. The convoy got away, Vasquez said. They will send help. How do you know? Because that is what humans do. They do not abandon each other, not if they can help it. Webb nodded slowly. She wanted to believe it. Everyone wanted to believe it. In Cargo Bay 3, Chen surveyed the damage. The gravity lens was destroyed, its crystal core blackened and cracked from the energy that had passed through it. The frame they had built was twisted and melted. The cargo bay door was stuck half open, its mechanism fused by the heat of the blast, but they had survived. Tanaka was lying on a makeshift stretcher, her left arm broken and her face burned from radiation flash, but she was smiling. It worked, she whispered. The math was right, the focusing adjustments, they worked. I know we reduced the backward blast by almost 30%. You saved us, Chen said. We saved ourselves. Tanaka closed her eyes. All of us together. That is how humans work. When one person cannot do something alone, they find others to help. When something is impossible, they do it anyway. She laughed weakly, then winced at the pain. The breath never understood that. They thought we were weak because we needed each other. They did not realize that needing each other is what makes us strong. Chen sat down beside her, his own body ached from a dozen small injuries. His lungs burned from breathing recycled air that was increasingly stale, but he was alive. Against all odds, against all logic, against everything the universe had thrown at them, he was alive. What do we do now? He asked. We wait, we hope. Will we survive? Tanaka opened her eyes and looked at him. And we remember what we did here. We remember that humans do not give up, not ever. The waiting was the hardest part. With the immediate crisis over, the crew had nothing to do but conserve air and hope. Some people slept, others talked in whispers, saving their breath. A few played cards by light stick glow, treating the situation like any other tough assignment. Vasquez made her rounds as she had done every day since the attack, but now her words were different. You survived, she told each person she visited. You did the impossible. Whatever happens next, no one can take that away from you. The ship continued to drift. The air continued to thin. The cold continued to seep in. They had won their battle, but they might still lose the war against physics and time. And then 16 hours after the firing, something appeared on the horizon. Captain Park's voice was hollow from cold and exhaustion, but there was no mistaking the excitement in it. Contact, multiple contacts bearing 270, they are coming fast. Vasquez pushed herself to the bridge as quickly as she could, identification working on it. The sensors are barely functional. But Park squinted at his display. Human signatures, Captain, they are human. Ships. Torres was already at her station, trying to coax the damaged communication system to life. I am getting a signal. Weak but readable. It is the convoy. They reached Colony 7 and sent back a rescue fleet. How many ships? 6. No. 8. And Captain, one of them is the UES Defiant, a battleship. Vasquez felt her legs go weak. She grabbed the nearest handhold to keep from floating away. Put them through. Whatever you have to do, put them through. Communication screen flickered, died. Flickered again, then a face appeared. Stern-faced man in a Commodore's uniform, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. UE's Adamantine. This is Commodore Harrison of the UES Defiant. We received word from your convoy of an attack. Are you still operational? Do you have survivors? Vasquez straightened up. Her uniform was torn and stained. Her face was gaunt from hunger and cold. Her eyes were red from exhaustion and frozen tears, but her voice was steady. Commodore, this is Captain Alelina Vasquez of the Adamantine. We are operational. We have approximately 200 survivors. We are low on air and in need of immediate medical assistance. 200 survivors from a crew of 340. Harrison's face softened slightly. We are on our way, Captain. ETA 4 hours. Can you hold out that long? We can hold out as long as we need to, Commodore. We have had practice. Understood, Captain. Harrison hesitated. We passed through the sector where the breath fleet was. Reported, we found nothing but debris and radiation. What happened here? Vasquez looked at her bridge crew. Park, Torres, the others who had worked and fought and refused to die. She thought about Chen and Tanaka in the cargo bay. She thought about Dr. Webb and her patients. She thought about the 12 people who had died in the freezing darkness and the soldiers who had died in the initial attack. We survived, and she said, that is what happened. The breath tried to kill us, and we survived. Captain, our sensors are showing readings that do not make sense. There are energy signatures we have never seen before. There is debris that appears to be from a planetary body. The physics of what happened here is classified, Vasquez said firmly, at least until I speak to Fleet Command. For now, let us just say that the breath underestimated us. They will not make that mistake again. Harrison studied her for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. Understood, Captain. Help is on the way. Defiant out. The screen went dark. Park let out a long breath. We made it. We actually made it. Not yet, Vasquez said. We made it when everyone is off this ship and in a proper medical facility. Until then, we are still fighting. But she was smiling when she said it. In the next 4 hours passed like 4 years. The air grew thinner. The temperature dropped further. People began to fade, their bodies giving up. Now that rescue was in sight, Webb moved through the ship with her dwindling supplies, keeping people alive through sheer force of will. She administered the last of the stimulants, the last of the oxygen supplements, the last of everything, and when she ran out of medicine, she used words instead. Stay with me, help is coming, just a little longer. You can do this. Some people Could not do it, 3 more died in those final hours, their bodies simply giving out after days of cold and stress. And hope, Vasquez memorized their names, as she had memorized all the others, but most survived, most held on. And when the Defiant finally matched velocity with the Adamantine, and when the first rescue shuttles began docking with the battered cruiser, Vasquez allowed herself to feel relief for the first time in 3 days. The evacuation was efficient and professional. Medical teams swarmed the ship, triaging patients and rushing the most critical cases to the Defiant sick bay. Engineers assessed the damage, shaking their heads at what they saw: a ship that should have been a coffin somehow still holding together. Vasquez was one of the last to leave. She walked through the empty corridors one final time, running her hand along the cold metal walls. The Adamantine had been her home for 5 years. It had carried her through battles and storms. In the long quiet of deep space, it had protected her crew when everything else failed, and it had given them the chance to fight back. "Yeah, thank you," she whispered to the ship. "I know you cannot hear me, but thank you." Then she turned and walked to the docking port, where the last shuttle was waiting. The debriefing took 3 days. Vasquez told the story from beginning to end: the ambush, the cascade disruptor, the discovery of the gravity lens, the desperate plan, the firing. The Moon Fleet Command listened in silence. When she finished, there were no questions for a long moment. Then Admiral Chen, the head of the inquiry board, leaned forward. "Captain, do you understand what you were describing? A weapon that can destroy a planet, that can compress matter into singularities, that can turn moons into temporary suns." "I understand, Admiral. And you built this weapon from spare parts in a capacitor in the dark on a ship with no power." "My crew built it, sir. I just gave them permission." The Admiral sat back. His expression was unreadable. The gravity lens was being transported for destruction. It was deemed too dangerous to exist. And now you have proven that assessment correct. A single device hastily assembled destroyed 15 warships and a moon. Yes, sir, the political implications alone are staggering. If the Breath learn what happened, if any of the other powers learn, with respect, Admiral, the Breath already know, or they will when their fleet does not return. As for the other powers, Vasquez met his eyes. Perhaps it is time they learn what humans are capable of when we have no other choice. The inquiry board conferred in whispers. Finally, Admiral Chen nodded. "Captain Vasquez, the official record will state that the Breath fleet was destroyed by an experimental weapon that malfunctioned during the attack, destroying both the enemy and itself. The details are classified at the highest level. Do you understand?" "I understand, sir." "Good." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "Off the record, Captain, what you and your crew did was impossible. You should all be dead. The fact that you are not is a testament to human ingenuity and courage that I have rarely seen in my 50 years of service." "Thank you, Admiral. Do not thank me yet. The Breath Dominion is going to want answers. They are going to want revenge. And when they come looking for it, they will find us ready," Vasquez said. As always, 3 months later, the Verith Dominion sent an ambassador to human space, and it was the first diplomatic contact in decades. The ambassador came alone in a small shuttle, broadcasting peace signals the entire way. The meeting took place on Outpost Sigma 12, a neutral station on the edge of human territory. Vasquez was invited to attend, though she was ordered to remain silent unless directly addressed. The Verith ambassador was old, his gray skin marked with scars from countless years of service to the Dominion. His name was VTH Korath, and he had been a fleet commander before the humans were even a space-faring species. We have analyzed the debris, he said without preamble. We have studied the energy signatures. We know what you did. The human delegation remained silent. A gravity lens. We did not think your species had such technology. We were wrong. VTH Korath's black eyes swept across the room, settling on Vasquez. You were the captain of that ship. Vasquez nodded. I was. You were dying. Your ship was dead. You had no weapons, no power, no hope, and yet you found a way to destroy an entire fleet and a moon. The ambassador's voice was flat, but there was something in his eyes that might have been respect or fear or both. We found a way to survive, Vasquez said. That is what humans do. Yes, we understand that now. Thorath turned back to the human diplomats. The Dominion has decided to reconsider its position regarding humanity. We will withdraw from the contested sectors. We will recognize your territorial claims. We will coexist, and if we refuse, one of the diplomats asked. Thorath's eyes returned to Vasquez. Then more ships will come, and perhaps you will destroy them, or perhaps you will destroy more moons, more planets, more stars. Perhaps you will burn the entire galaxy before you accept defeat. He shook his head slowly. We are an old species. We have conquered thousands of worlds. We have crushed countless civilizations, but we have never seen anything like what happened in that system. He stood up. The meeting was over. You are not vermin, he said as he left. We were fools to think you were. You are something far more dangerous. You are creative. You are stubborn. And you have absolutely no sense of when you are supposed to give up. The door closed behind him. In the silence that followed, one of the diplomats turned to Vasquez. Captain, what exactly does he mean by creative? Vasquez thought about the cargo bay, the gravity lens, the capacitor, the trigger made from a pole, and some metal contacts. The crew working in the dark, in the cold, refusing to die. He means, she said slowly, that when you tell a human something is impossible, we take it as a challenge. And when you take away all our options, we make new ones. And when you try to kill us, she smiled, we find a way to kill you first, even if we have to rewrite the laws of physics to do it. The gravity lens schematics were recovered from the Adamantine's records. They were studied, analyzed, and then locked away in the deepest vaults of Human Fleet Command. A single note was attached to the file: Project Prometheus. Status archived. Do not deploy except in case of existential threat to humanity. Remember what we learned. This weapon does not just destroy our enemies, it destroys everything nearby, so use only when there is truly no other choice. Below the official note, someone had added a handwritten comment, and remember what the breath learned: never corner a human. We are most dangerous when we have nothing to lose. The adamantine was eventually repaired. It took 8 months and cost more than building a new ship would have, but Vasquez insisted, and Fleet Command agreed. The ship had earned the right to fly again. When the repairs were complete, Vasquez stood in the restored cargo bay where the gravity lens had been. The space was empty now, just metal walls and deck plating, but she could still feel the echoes of what had happened there. Chen and Tanaka came to stand beside her. It feels strange, Tanaka said, being back here alive. It feels right, Chen replied. This is where we fought. This is where we won. This is where we proved that humans are not vermin. Vasquez nodded slowly. The breath will never forget what happened here, neither will anyone else who hears the story. A dead ship, a dying crew, a weapon that should not exist, and somehow against all odds victory. She turned to face them. That is the human story. That is what we do. We face impossible odds and we find a way through. Not because we are stronger or smarter or better equipped, but because we refuse to give up, because we would rather die trying than live surrendering, because when someone tells us we cannot do something, we prove them wrong. Outside the cargo bay window, stars gleamed in the eternal darkness. Somewhere out there, the breath were rebuilding. Other species were watching. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and full of things that wanted humanity dead, but humanity was ready. Humanity had always been ready because humans were creative. Humans were stubborn. Humans were absolutely unwilling to accept defeat. And when the next impossible threat came, when the next enemy decided that humans were prey, when the next crisis seemed too big to survive, humanity would do what it always did. It would find a way. It would build something impossible. It would refuse to die, and the galaxy would learn once again why you should never underestimate a human with nothing to lose.